Hello, my name is Alexa Hinojosa, and my group and I will be identifying the different cognitive biases and what we can do to reduce them, including the backfire effect, conformity to peers, confirmation bias, and cognitive dissonance. Before my group members and I jump into the different cognitive biases, some of you might be wondering, what is a cognitive bias? A cognitive bias is, by definition, is a strong preconceived notion of someone or something based on information we have, perceive to have, or lack. I'll be starting off the presentation by talking about the backfire effect. The backfire effect is one of the many cognitive bias, and it is when one encounters evidence that challenges their belief, and they will reject that evidence and will strengthen their original belief. An example of the backfire effect is parents vaccinating their children. A study found that giving parents that are against vaccinating their children information and showing statistics on how it is effective, the parent is more likely to link vaccination to autism when there is no correlation between the two. I've included the picture to the right of different misconceptions that vaccinations cause autism. For all biases, there are techniques that can be used to make one more aware of the bias. One way to help reduce the backfire effect is to understand what it is and to be able to simplify the definition and to be able to explain it to others in an easier form. McIntyre bases the backfire effect off of experimental work done by two individuals, Brendan and Jason. They found that when people are presented with evidence that involves politics, one will be easy to reject it and will only believe their belief, and in worst cases, increase their belief that is proven wrong with evidence and or facts. The study that was done, subjects were given fake newspapers that had misconceptions on it that were being discussed at the time. When the claim was challenged in the newspaper with quotations that counter-argued the first claim, they were still to believe the initial false claim, even when presented with evidence after in quotation. I've included the picture on the right because one will not necessarily go the right or wrong way, but they're going to go their way. Now I'm going to pass it to Christian that will be discussing conformity to peers.
Thank you, Alexa. So, my name is Christian, and I'll be talking to you all about the conformity to peers bias. The conformity to peers bias is the tendency that people have to behave like those around them, rather than using their own personal judgment. Now, people face this throughout all walks of life, but one of my earliest memories of this affecting me was in elementary school with silly bands. Did I think they were the coolest thing or worth the hype? No, not necessarily. But you better believe I went out and bought me some and fit in with the crowd. And that's really how this bias is thriving. It thrives because people don't want to stick out. They'd rather lay low just to fit in with the crowd and not be different. So, what is wrong with conformity bias and why is it a bad thing? Well, there are a few reasons for this. First, it can cause people to not be themselves. This is more apparent with things like how people dress or how they act so they don't stand out, so they'd rather fit in with the crowd. Another reason why this bias is bad is because it can cause people to not believe in themselves. This can be more apparent with things like, let's say you're in a group and the whole group's opinion is one thing, but you have a different opinion. But instead of being different, you voice their opinion so you don't stick out. And there's a lot more reasons why this is a negative thing, but the last one I'm going to be talking about is how it can be negative in a bigger decision. For example, let's say mayor. The mayor knows what's right for the people, but the people don't, and they're all voicing their opinion for the wrong thing. So instead of the mayor believing in himself and doing what's right for the people, he falls to the people and picks the wrong decision because he's scared of facing the consequences and scared of sticking out in fear of rejection. Now, is it always 100% a bad thing? No, it's not. It can help build strong bonds or rightly influence some decisions of a higher individual or a group. Same thing with the mayor. Let's say the mayor in this situation was going to pick the bad choice, and instead, the people were trying to voice their opinions of what was right because they know what it is for their day-to-day lives, and the mayor changes his decision for what's right. Now, there are a lot of ways you can deal with conformity to peers bias, but the main way is to just believe in yourself and accept that it's okay to be different and stick out, and you don't always have to follow the crowd.
Thank you, Christian. That was awesome. My name is Jay Stout, and I'll be talking about confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when we favor our own beliefs and values over evidence. You may be wondering how we use it to favor our own beliefs and values. Well, people have their own beliefs and values, and when we feel like they're threatened, we automatically go into attack mode and start searching for something to back them up. When we do this, we are using confirmation bias. People do this just because they're threatened by the fact that they could be wrong. And I don't know about you, but I hate being wrong. Some examples of confirmation bias would be, let's say you move to a new school and you don't know anyone and you're having trouble making friends, and there's this one popular person you want to be friends with. Let's just call him Mike. If Mike comes to school and never talks to you and never even gives you the time of day, it's not his fault that you feel like he doesn't like you. So while you're sitting there feeling sorry for yourself, you're just assuming he doesn't like you. You should try to be his friend and confront him instead of waiting for him. So that makes it confirmation bias because you're assuming and there's no evidence behind that. Another example would be when we have a conversation about politics. There's so many credible sources out there on the web today, but it doesn't stop people from spreading their false beliefs about what's going on in politics. Let's say you have a friend hammering something down your throat about why their presidential pick should be elected. Everything they are saying is incorrect or has no evidence behind it. And you say no, and you show them evidence and facts, and that obviously shows the truth. And they say, well, I believe what I believe. That is confirmation bias because they are ignoring evidence. I feel like there's a couple ways we can fix it, but I don't feel like there will ever be a world where confirmation bias isn't present, because there will always be someone challenging it because no one likes to be wrong. But the only way for someone to stop a bias, or for us to stop a bias, would be to become aware of confirmation bias and try to stop themselves. I don't feel like there's a way to enforce it, but I do think people need to take responsibility and make sure they're not spreading lies and false information. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Amanda, and I will be presenting on cognitive dissonance. Now, while confirmation bias involves selectively collecting evidence to support what we think is true, cognitive dissonance involves newly acquired information conflicting with what we believe to be true. So, have you ever changed your beliefs or thoughts after being presented with information or circumstance that challenged what you originally thought or wanted? If so, you suffered from a cognitive bias known as cognitive dissonance. You may be wondering, what is that? Well, the Oxford Dictionary defines cognitive dissonance as the state of having inconsistent thoughts, beliefs, or attitudes, especially as relating to behavioral decisions and attitude change. In American social psychologist Leon Festinger's book, A Theory of Cognitive Dissonance, he states the idea that in our beliefs, behavior, and our attitudes, we seek for them to coexist in harmony with one another. When the harmony of these things is disrupted, we experience discomfort, seek to quell it via doing something such as altering our thought pattern. In the dissonance theory, it is not stated that attempts to ease the psychological discomfort will actually work. It only states that individuals will take the steps they feel are necessary to reduce this discomfort. Now, for examples of cognitive dissonance. Cases of cognitive dissonance can be seen in action in some of the typical ways we comfort ourselves, such as when facing rejection. For example, if you don't get into medical school, you might change your thought pattern and think, I didn't want to go to medical school anyways. Another example of cognitive dissonance can be seen in people who smoke. People who smoke, when confronted with the information that smoking causes cancer and heart disease and other health effects, they can feel dissonance. In a study of cognitive dissonance patterns in smokers by researchers at the University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada, it was found that smokers who didn't quit at all between the 3 waves between October 2002 to December 2004 exhibited higher rationalizations for their smoking behavior. Additionally, those who quit but relapsed showed a renewed behavior rationalizing their smoking habit. You see the way they try to cope with the dissonance felt by knowing the dangers of smoking through the rationalization of what they're doing. Aesop's story, The Fox and the Grape, shows another example of psychological discomfort in an attempt to soothe it. The story is about a fox that is struggling to reach a bunch of grapes on a vine high up in a tree that it finds to be desirable. Confronted with the fact that it is unable to reach the grapes, it proceeds to decide the grapes are probably bad anyways in order to ease the discomfort of the circumstances. A last example in how it works in voters is this tweet I saw of someone saying, "I'd rather look at false information and keep my conservative views than take in true facts and become a socialist machine." Okay, identifying cognitive dissonance. Identifying when you're going through cognitive dissonance might pose as a challenge for some people, but it becomes easier when you remember these signs of it. Signs of cognitive dissonance include psychological discomfort, confusion, feelings of being conflicted, and being unsure of what to do when made aware of something that conflicts with your beliefs, behavior, or attitude. Lastly, resolving cognitive dissonance may pose an even bigger challenge than identifying it. Ways to resolve it include making changes to your attitude, behavior, or belief, changing the relationship between those previously mentioned and the conflict, or minimizing the importance of cognition such as your belief and attitude. Now, that's all I have for cognitive dissonance, and here are the works cited by Alexa, Jace, Christian, and myself. Thank you for listening.